Hey guys, it's Matt here, and first of all I'd like to say something about a developer with whom I've been having a love-hate relationship in the past few years. Ubisoft. Even though I didn't realize it at the time because of my age, I've been playing Ubisoft games ever since I started gaming, with games like Rayman, Ghost Recon and Rainbow Six. As far as I was concerned, this developer did everything I wanted from a game. Funny cartoonish side-scrollers on one hand, very tactical first-person shooters that were way too difficult for me at the time, so I let my dad play on the other hand. And for many years I loved playing the games that they came up with. Even later on I started to fall in love with games like For Honor, Assassin's Creed and even The Crew. So for me it looked like they couldn't do anything wrong. And yet, they did. The first Assassin's Creed game I played was Brotherhood, and it was great. But after playing that, I played the first and third one, which didn't leave a very good impression with me. Or at least not as good as I hoped it to be. Then Far Cry 3, one of the most beloved games in the franchise, was in my opinion just fine. But having played it after Far Cry 2, it just felt very watered down, and no matter how cool you think Voss is, spoilers! The revelation that you kill him halfway through the game and he's actually not even the main protagonist was kind of a bummer, to be honest. And to add insult to injury, yes, I was one of those guys who actually pre-ordered the first Watch Dogs. But as soon as they started to announce a brand new game called The Division, which held the, in my opinion, huge responsibility of maintaining the pretty solid reputation of the late Tom Clancy and the games his name is linked to, I actually didn't really care about it anymore. Sure, the trailers looked good, but there was another game that also looked good before actually releasing. So basically, the disappointment that Ubisoft brought me over the previous few years made it so that I didn't even buy the game. In fact, I never did. Because the reviews that came out weren't all that positive either. It was only in the last year or so that Ubisoft decided to become really cool again and just give away some of their flagship titles. The Division was one of them. So I thought, you know what, let's see if I can rekindle that love I once shared with Ubisoft and see if the game actually improved over the past few years. Let's just temporarily escape the reality of where I'm in the middle of a pandemic, I'm fairly limited to where I can go, where I need to wear a mask at most places I visit and I constantly get reminded that I need to wash my hands. And let's go play a game in which I'm in the middle of a pandemic, fairly limited to where I can go, where I have to wear a mask at most places I visit and where I'm constantly reminded that I have to wash my hands. So I'm here to answer the question, is Tom Clancy's The Division really that bad?
If we take this city back, I'll buy you a drink. Sorry. I mean, when we take it back.
Tom Clancy's The Division takes place in New York City during a huge pandemic and follows a specialized group of fighters called, you guessed it, The Division. Because apparently the people who had to come up with an original name were responsible enough to stay at home during this pandemic. The story in this game is pretty hard to follow, since the game pretty much expects you to already understand what's going on. A very simple montage without narration of people who infect each other by touching dirty dollar bills is pretty much the only explanation you're going to get. And that's fine because the story is pretty much about finding out what caused the huge outbreak. The only problem? You really have to work a lot in order to actually shape this story. That's because most of this story is explained through cutscenes and texts that are found throughout the world as evidence and collectibles. If you don't read, watch or listen to those, I guarantee you that you won't even realize that there even is a pandemic, and you just think you're walking through a version of New York City where everyone is just a bit more grumpy than usual.
It's not like this place is gonna win any prizes either. Antique equipment, 0 staff, patients lining up out the door. This isn't gonna cut it.
On top of that, the characters are laughably forgettable, mostly because there's nothing to make them feel likable or worth fighting for. The only reason they're there is so they can send you to missions and complain about your work or compliment you when you did a good job. And it really sounds like the voice actors try to make the best of a script that feels like Michael Bay's very first elementary school project.
I trained for a scenario like this my entire life, but it's worse than anything we could have imagined. You know how they won't let you get too close to anyone, so it won't mess you up when you're finally activated? Well, I did that, and it didn't fucking work. I'm attached. These are my people. This is my city. We're taking it back. Oh.
Look,
if it's not the main characters that bore or annoy the crap out of you, it will most definitely be the side characters that only spew out cringeworthy attempts of being funny.
Oh, honey.
There's a cold-blooded murderer out there. Some awful lady named Michelle Mason. I guess they want me to ask you to stop her, but you have to promise me you'll be careful.
Or even your own character, who doesn't even have a voice, and only does that, "Oh, I don't know what's going on, I don't know how to talk" gesture with his stupid face that I couldn't even fully customize because this game only has 5 faces and hairstyles per gender. Character customization my ass. And as if that wasn't enough, the other NPCs, such as inhabitants of New York or the enemies, don't even add any sort of weight to the story, because they're just random copies of each other who keep yelling out the same standard dialogue options over and over and over.
It's gonna make my day to waste you!
The only people you can see doing some actual interesting stuff are the actual people playing the game, who you can only see in safe houses or in the PvP area in this game called the Dark Zone. And that says a lot about the characters in this game, since just as you, these guys can talk as well. Unless of course you're in a chat with a lot of Asian people, or a random German guy forgot to mute his microphone while he was making a phone call.
Outlaw. Hallo.
You can only join these people's squads inside the safe houses, and they will despawn as soon as you or they walk out of the safe house. No random encounters with random people above ground in the actual open world, something that even Fallout 76 was able to do. I mean, not in a good way, but they did it nonetheless. It's pretty much just a shame to see a very interesting premise go to waste on such a poor execution. Especially because the subject of a pandemic is such a huge part of our own life right now. This story could have been so much more if it told a story about how the people of New York try to keep going with their lives while this specialized group of fighters is there to lend a helping hand, and you actually encounter some people you would actually give a damn about. As far as gameplay goes, this game starts off pretty strong. This game is what's called by most people a looter shooter. A game in which you level up by doing missions in an open world where you can find or get rewarded with loot. In this case, better guns or clothes. And fortunately, The Division is a good looter shooter. As I said, the gameplay is pretty solid. The cover system works pretty well. Interacting with your environment works flawlessly. And the guns handle different enough from each other to make it rewarding to try different loadouts throughout the game. In the beginning you definitely feel like you're invincible, but as soon as you start encountering higher level enemies, the game actually starts to become increasingly more difficult, and sometimes even downright unbeatable if you go into a level under-equipped. The biggest problem, gameplay-wise, is something that every looter shooter copes with, in my opinion, and that is it even fun? Looter shooters are known for being quite rewarding, since everything you do gives you something as a reward, but there are 2 things you need to take into account. Is the reward you're getting actually rewarding? And is the objective worth playing through for a reward? As far as the rewards themselves go, I think this game is great. Sure, there are some moments where you had a pretty difficult level and you get rewarded with an underpowered gun or something like that. But overall, it was pretty solid, and I kept getting surprised by the amount of guns and pieces of clothing that are in this game. The thing that made it kind of repetitive for me was the fact that the missions are not very interesting at all. Sure, a reward can be good, but if every mission boils down to start mission, go here, shoot people, go back, it's just pretty boring after a while. There is enough variety in missions, but there are so many of each that at the end you still feel like putting the game away because you just did this. Especially like in the side missions where you have to carry components to a certain location. That suitcase of components is apparently so heavy that your character slows down to a snail's pace, and in most cases they are like 30 or 40 meters away every time, so the person who gave you the objective could have just picked them up themselves. There are also missions in which you have to take samples of contaminated areas, and I thought this could have been like irradiated areas in Fallout, where you have to wear protective clothing in order to not get contaminated. But no. You just wear a simple mask that you can find very early on in the game, and now you can walk in and out of these areas whenever you want without any sort of consequence. Even when you play through the main game and you encounter some beautifully recreated real-life locations like Madison Square Garden, Times Square and the Grand Central Station. You think because it's the main mission something interesting will happen, but you just shoot a bunch of guys, pick something up, defend something, and that's it. Just like in the story, it's just such a shame that it could have been so much more, especially because you actually can have a lot of fun when you do these missions with other people, and the game world itself looks absolutely amazing. I mean, sure, the E3 trailer from all the way back in, I don't know, 2014 or something, looked even better, but that doesn't mean that the end product looks bad by any means. The lighting, particle effects and overall texture quality are top notch, even for an, at this point, 4-year-old game. In conclusion, The Division is a very beautiful open world looter shooter with more than enough rewards to keep you interesting. And gameplay wise it plays very well. It's just a shame that you will never feel like it fully lives up to its own potential. I mean, sure, you can have a lot of fun with other people online, and I definitely did. And at least the season pass added a lot of different game modes and areas to explore to at least make it feel a bit more interesting. But overall the game feels pretty empty, and sometimes just downright repetitive. So to answer my question, is Tom Clancy's The Division really that bad? No, not at all. It's just disappointing. The potential was there, the execution leaves a lot to the imagination.
Wow!
As always, thank you guys a lot for watching. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think of The Division, or maybe even The Division 2, because I will make a video about that in the future. You can also follow me on Instagram to keep up to date with my videos, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!